Good to go. It is 5:30 and we will call this meeting of the Port of Olympia Commission to order. Commissioner Ayala, can we do this in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of course.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for bearing with us with our room. We are getting set up for 5 commissioners, so we're a little, we're in a unique spot today. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Any discussion on the agenda? All right, all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Executive Director report, Executive Director Rudolph.
We have an action-packed agenda tonight, so I have no executive director report.
We will now move to public comment. Individual public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Members of the public may comment on agenda items and other port business. Our guidelines for public comment can be found in our Commission Rules Resolution, Article 6. Comments should be directed to the commission as a whole and should not include comments about individual port staff or members of the public. Please be courteous in language and demeanor. And is there anyone on Zoom that would like to give public comment? No. Is there anyone on the sign-in sheet? Well, goodness. All right. Oh, I've got it. Okay, Carla Wolfsburg. Carla Wolfsburg, thank you for joining us, Carla.
Right, can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Great. So, yes, my name's Carla Wolfsburg. I live in Tumwater. And I see that on your agenda tonight, you're going to discuss probably the largest land lease the port has ever undertaken, which is to Swire Corporation. And I'm a bit concerned about yet a new name for this company. And it made a presentation to you back in 2022, and they're Swire Coca-Cola. Now the amendment to the lease, it's the third name that this company has had. And that's concerning, but I think it's confusing and it's probably illegal because the public was not informed of that name change. But just moving forward, a very troubling issue for me of this Swire lease amendment is on page 6 under additional provisions number 3, confidentiality. And you're allowing a clause in the lease to hold, which states, quote, the port will not issue any public announcement in any form concerning same, end quote, unquote. And same is what you're referring to as any project that Swire is contemplating to build. So I think this is yet again another example of the port's lack of transparency. You are expecting the public to make a public records request to get any information about what this massive project could be. And I think this should be struck from and deleted from your lease amendment. And in addition, I noticed that you are also going to discuss the Little League lease and the Panattoni lease. And I'm asking you, what is the rush? Why do you have to move these so quickly? Would it not be more equitable and appropriate to postpone these discussions until the 3 newly elected port commissioners are installed in office in January 2024? So allowing these decisions and discussions to be made with a full port commission is the most responsible and transparent action you can take. The appearance is that you are rushing decisions through tonight to circumvent the new port commissioners having an opportunity to address these significant issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfsburg. Do we have a clock? Are you doing it not? Okay. Any additional public comment on Zoom? No. And anyone in the room? Okay, great. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, Commissioner Downing?
None, thank you.
Commissioner Ayala?
No.
All those in favor of approving the consent calendar as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Pending issues or business, none. We'll move on to action calendar. Number 1, Capital Little League, Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations. Thank you for joining us, Warren.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. We'll be seeing a lot of each other this evening, apparently. Looking at the agenda. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations, here to talk to you tonight about the Capital Little League lease amendment. You may recall that,
May I interrupt you, Warren?
yes, you may.
Would it please you if we moved to a motion, since this has already been in front of the commission numerous times?
I had heard that that might be a possibility, and I would welcome that request.
Okay, and
Yes.
just so the public is aware, per the previous comments, this has been before the commission in this form multiple times. This would be a repetition, almost verbatim, of a presentation already given.
Exactly. In fact, the slide before you shows that tonight's action is requested, and it is an exact duplicate of the advisory presentation before this very commission on November 6th, which video is available to anyone online to see exactly the nature of the information I would have presented you tonight.
So our intent is to be transparent with the public and as well be expedient with our meeting in respect of all of our guests. So,
Exactly. So with that, I will fast forward to the slide that hosts the motion
thank you.
for your benefit.
Hearing that, then I will move to authorize the interim executive director to execute both the 2024 and 2028 lease amendment and its associated memorandum of understanding with Capital Little League.
It has been moved to authorize the interim executive director to execute both the 2024 to 2028 lease amendment and its associated memorandum of understanding MOU with Capital Little League. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion, Commissioner Arnold?
None.
Commissioner Downing?
Once again, I'd like to commend Warren Hendrickson for taking a difficult subject and finding a mutual common ground between us and the Little League. Thank you, Warren.
I would just like to echo that the feedback from the community has been very positive from a diversity of stakeholders, and I think it gave a great opportunity for you to build rapport. Thank you for how you handled that.
Very welcome.
There any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you, Commissioners.
We will move on to resolution 2023-08. Commission roles, Camille St. Ange, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Commission Affairs.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having me today. The two resolutions I'm bringing before you viewed last week, and both of them essentially update for a 5-member commission with a quorum. We've changed some administrative language like town hall versus a chat, and we've updated our public comment to include our process with Zoom. I can offer for you today the motion that was in your agendas and the cover memos, which I believe Missy has given you a copy of. Unless you'd like to have any questions about the resolutions.
Are there any questions, Commissioners?
No, I will go ahead and move to authorize the adoption of Rules Resolution 2023-08.
Is there a second?
I do second.
It's been moved and seconded. Commissioner Ayala, any discussion?
No discussion or questions.
Commissioner Downing?
No discussion. Thank you.
Camille, just for the benefit of making sure we're keeping things slow and communicating with the public adequately, really administrative, just moving from 3 to 5 on our rules. Anything else you'd like to add about any substantive changes or anything else beyond just expanding our rules so that it makes sense, expanding to 5 commissioners?
Right, on the 2023-09, I think the only significant change there is that we've allowed the executive director to have a designee act on their behalf with the advisory committee, which I'm acting in that role now. And we've updated some administrative language to make the group more friendly in inviting so that they have more freedom on the types of products that they can bring before the commission.
Okay, and there was discussion about that at the previous meeting.
There was.
An opportunity for public comment and
Yes.
now really just administratively moving.
Yeah,
forward.
just administrative updates.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. So it's been moved and seconded, or any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded to authorize the adoption of rules resolution 2023-08. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And
The second resolution would be, I provided same motion for 2023-09.
would entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the adoption of rules resolution 2023-09.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion, Commissioner Arnold?
No discussion.
Commissioner Downing?
I have a question for Camille.
Yeah, go ahead.
How's it going? I attended a POCAC meeting last week. Camille, are you enjoying that role? Sitting in and providing support to them?
Yeah, it's really been far more enriching than I ever anticipated. The community members that we have representing all of, most of the districts have just been wonderful to work with. They're engaged, they have great recommendations, their hearts and their minds, they have a lot of, experience in various areas that are very, I want to say informative. So it's been really great. I've enjoyed it, like I said, beyond anything that I would have anticipated. So it actually brings me great joy.
Great. Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
And I would just point out the two things that Camille mentioned, one being the executive director being able to delegate the authority, which just makes sense if the executive director feels that that's functional for the organization. And then the second part being some feedback around inclusivity and how the rigidity of those POCAC meetings, which maybe it will be called something else someday if they so decide, but the rigidity of those meetings was not inclusive. And so making it more inclusive by not having the rigidity. So, okay, any further discussion? Great. It has been moved and seconded to authorize the adoption of rules resolution 2023-09. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Camille. Thank you. Okie dokie. Budget adoption, resolution 2023-10, adoption of 2024 levy amount, and resolution 2023-11, adoption of the 2024 annual operating budget. Tad Cobb, interim director of finance. Hi, Tad.
Good evening, directors. Hello, commissioners. Hello, Tad Coffin, I'm director of finance. Presenting the final draft, final budget and tax resolution. Oh, the button's not clicking. There we
There we
go.
go.
Oh, hold on. Too far. Today's presentation is action requested. We're gonna have two resolutions we're looking at. 20-23-10, which has a typo on it. I'm going to have the correction to read correctly. And 2023-11, adoption of budget and capital investment plan. These slides are just the same that have been on the last few presentations. Capital budget for reference. Cash statutory budget also for reference. And in cash working capital, again, for reference. And the calculated tax levy, no changes on here as well. And the correction on the sample motion is for 2023-10 instead of the 3.57, it is a 1%. Which is the 1% tax increase. And when that is rounded, is 1%. And there's an amended form resolution in the folder as well.
Okay.
And I also have a paper one if you wanted that.
Did we get an answer on I had presented for the commission's vote contributing $10,000 to the Little League. Was that question answered by legal counsel?
Not yet, but Commissioner, when that can come up later on as a normal course of business, but it doesn't necessarily need to be done in the budget tonight. But Rick, if you wanted to address that, certainly go ahead.
Sure. Well, I think I had a discussion with Rudy about what I believe is the commission's intent, and I do think it runs into issues of gift of public funds. I do think that Rudy is possibly exploring ways in which that could be accomplished in such a way that we don't have that gift issue. That would mainly be a roughly equal exchange of consideration.
Okay, so that's something you're gonna follow up on.
Yes, Commissioner.
But an outright grant or gift to the Little League wouldn't work.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions before we entertain a motion?
I'll move to adopt resolution 2023-10, a resolution to adopt the levy amount for 2024, which is a 1% increase over 2023.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion, Commissioner Downing?
I will just say, I appreciate Port staff working with us. We want to keep tax increases as small as possible. This represents a 1% increase, which is far less than inflation and necessary to support public amenities, environmental remediation, things like that, and of course, commission overhead. And I appreciate that. Well, it does support the debt as well in total, the tax levy, and I would love to see the port literally pay off all debt within the next 2 or 3 years. I think it is possible. So with that, there's my motion.
Great. Any discussion, Commissioner Ryle?
Yeah, I would like to say that I would not normally be in favor of any type of increase in the tax levy amount. However, I think what we've learned through Ted's presentations over the last few meetings and what our debt service is like right now, I don't think we're in a position that we should be trying to change that now. I do believe that it really is an indication and what we know now about our debt and how it's being serviced and what we can expect over the next 2 to 3 years, that it really puts an emphasis on analysis of our lines of business and understanding how they can be self-sufficient, and in the future how we finance any projects or purchases of equipment or upgrades to any of those, how we finance those so that we're not forcing that burden on the taxpayers.
Yeah, I think my fellow commissioners covered it pretty well. And one of the things this commission has been looking forward to is that mission versus margin conversation, and where our lines of business are providing an essential community service and giving back to the community, and where we're looking for more of a return on investment. So that will be talked about by the next year's commission. So is there let's see, we already have, it has been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 20. We already did on action, right? It's only on action other, right?
No, we took general.
Okay. Do our rules require me to take public comment on each individual action item or only on action other?
No, Commissioner. It's an action item. It doesn't require public comment. We've already had that
Right,
in our previous sections.
right.
And Commissioner, I might point out also at the beginning of the meeting, there was an opportunity for the public to comment on any agenda item.
Right. So
Okay.
just when it's an action other is when we take public comment after each individual item. When it's an action is when we take.
Yeah, and
Correct.
as I understand, this is sort of a placeholder, so you can ask, you have the option of more public comment if you want to.
Okay. I get it wrong pretty much every meeting, so that's why we haven't all adjusted. So it has been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2023-10, a resolution to adopt the levy amount for 2024, which is a 1% increase over 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Is there another motion?
Sure. Move to approve resolution 2023-11, a resolution of the Port of Olympia Commission authorizing, providing for acceptance, approval, and adoption of the final 2024 annual operating budget, including annual user rates and fees and capital investment plan pursuant to RCW 53.35.045.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2023-11, a resolution of the Port of Olympia Commission authorizing, providing for acceptance, approval, and adoption of the final 2024 annual operating budget, including annual user rates and fees and capital investment plan pursuant to RCW 53.35.045. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Did I miss something?
Discussion.
I'm sorry. I think yeah.
It's okay.
So,
I didn't have anything.
You didn't have any? Can we back up? Is there any further discussion? I think I motioned out. Any further discussion, Commissioner Downing?
No, thank you.
Any discussion,
thanks.
Commissioner Al?
Sorry.
I apologize. I'm gonna read it one more time. It's been moved to approve resolution 2023-11, a resolution of the Port of Olympia Commission authorizing, providing for acceptance, approval, and adoption the final 2024 annual operating budget, including annual user rates and fees and capital investment plan pursuant to RCW 53.35.045. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Downing, did you say aye?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Anything else?
No, Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Tad.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Now we will have public comment on the action calendar. Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to give public comment? Carla, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Carla Wolfsburg. I live in Tumwater. I'm a little unclear about public comment, first of all, because if you've already voted on something, how are you able to take the public comment after it's a fait accompli? I would think that you would want to hear from the public before you vote on that, all these items. And the one that I was going to talk about was the Little League. And on page 2 of the cover memo, dated November 27th, from Warren Hendrickson, it states, quote, the needed change was never about generating port revenue. It was simply a necessity to avoid running afoul of FAA compliance requirements for continued eligibility of federal funding, end quote. And I think this is somewhat of a contradiction because in fact, it is about revenue. It's about revenue from the FAA. It may not be directly from Little League, but it's for FAA so that the port can accept grants from the FAA in the future. And what we have learned, all of us from the public, and I would hope that the commissioners would take note of this, is that the FAA funding restricts all the powers of our port commissioners, our elected officials, for 20 years. And it's this lack of control over the Olympia Regional Airport it's undemocratic. If the FAA funding ties your hands with accepting their funding, I would want all of you to take steps to protect our democratic values and the public's ability to vote and have you as our representatives. So we're losing local control every time you take funds from the FAA. And that's why I think you should reject this whole idea of the Little League, because it's really only to get funding from the FAA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfberg. Any
Point of
other,
information,
Commissioner Downing?
Chair Harding. I looked up on the, I think the latest rules resolution 2022-02, and it has, the order of business for Port Commission meetings, and in fact, we don't have public comment listed for action items. So I think the agenda for tonight is a typo, and I would ask that we don't take further public comment on action items. Thank you.
I believe it has been the practice of having general public comment at the end of the action calendar. And the reason this is confusing is because we have had a number of other items that require public comment after each item, which I have erred at in the past. Is that it is the practice of the port, Rick, to take public comment at the end of the action calendar, correct? Just not after each.
I've actually seen it done a couple of different ways.
But this port.
Yeah, this port is what I'm
Oh,
referring to.
okay.
The Open Public Meetings Act requires that you take public comment on agenda items. And you did that at the beginning of the meeting. Your local rules, I don't think they specifically require public comment, but I think in the past you have allowed the additional public comment. So one thing that might be helpful if it's the commission's intent to allow public comment after every action item, I don't know if it is or not, but to have that listed directly after each item so that it doesn't come up at the end, but that's up to the commission.
And in the case, we've approved this agenda, which had public comment listed at the end of the action calendar. So does Commissioner Downing need to make a motion to amend the agenda to eliminate additional public comment?
No, I think you're beyond that. I think it's when you're preparing the agenda, that's when you want to determine whether you want a placeholder for additional public comment or not.
So Commissioner Downing, as far as I'm concerned as the chair, we approved the agenda with public comment at the end of the action calendar. I recognize that our rules resolution does not require that. Would you like to have any additional action taken? Or
I would not like additional action taken. My purpose in calling for the point of information is to point out that in my view, we're not following the resolution, and I would hope that this matter gets resolved for future meetings as far as when and how we take public comment.
And I think the 2024, this commission has been changing the process with which we take and respond to public comment in an effort to improve communication, transparency, and getting clear answers to factual questions. And the 2024 commission will have the opportunity to adjust the process however they would like. So we will continue with public comment. Lee Reiner, thank you for joining us, Lee. And Lee, we don't have the, I apologize, we don't have the timer up on the screen, so, oh, we do?
No.
Oh, okay, so Hannah will just let us know. You have 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us. We can't hear you, Lee. Can you hear us? Lee? Doesn't look like you're muted, Lee. One more time. Sorry, Lee, we can't hear you. Is there any additional public comment? No. Is anyone in the audience interested in giving public comment on the action calendar? Good. Okay, we will move on to action other, of which there is none, and we will now move on to our advisory calendar, surplus property, Commerce Business Center Resolution 2023-XX, Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations. Hello, Warren.
Good evening, Commissioners, once again. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations. The 3 advisory items before you tonight would normally be delivered by Clarita Maddox, our Real Estate Senior Manager. Clarita was on vacation last week. I thought patently it would be unfair for last week's deliberations to have passed and for her first day back from a little restful time away to before you tonight. So I will present the advisory presentations this evening. Clarita will then return back to you on December 11th for the action items. There are no action items remaining on tonight's agenda for these advisory items. The first 2 are very closely tied together. The item before us right immediately is the resolution 2023, yet to be unnumbered, on surplus property resolution. And I'll jump forward with that. I will channel my best Clarita Maddox to the best of my possibility, and that the business of the port is about business and it's about generating revenue and return on investment. And that's what these first two items definitely do. The item is a declaration of surplus property. It is advisory only. No action is requested this evening. There is a public comment opportunity available as part of the advisory item. This resolution is a prelude to the sale of the Commerce Business Center in Lacey. And the resolution and the actual purchase and sale agreement are two very closely related items. They cannot happen without each other, but they are two independent actions by the commission. The location of the Commerce Business Center is north of I-5 at the intersection of Willamette Drive and Commerce Place. It includes 3 separate tax parcels, and each one has its own permanent improvement on each of the tax parcels. Via the RCWs, the reason why this resolution comes before you tonight is that the property is valued greater than $10,000, and disposal of port property greater than $10,000 does require a formal commission resolution. The executive director must also provide certification to the Port Commission. I'll go into detail in that in a moment. It also requires a public newspaper notice in the newspaper, two occasions with 10 days notice prior to the commission action. It also requires a public hearing, and lastly, it requires the approval of a commission resolution. The certification by the interim executive director includes 4 specific topics. First, a statement that the tax parcel, or parcels in this case, and improvements are no longer needed for the Port District purposes. Secondly, that there is an intent to remove the listed improvements from the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, CSHI. That third, that there's an intent to amend CSHI for these changes. And lastly, that the intent is a negotiated transfer from the port to 1892 Holdings LLC, and that such a transfer is in the public interest. Each of these requirements have been met thus far to date. The first is the valuation was complete on August 22nd. The executive director certification was complete on November 20th. Newspaper public notices are in process. The first notice was already published on November 22nd. The second will be on December 1st, ensuring that the 10-day public notification requirement was met. The commission, the executive session is also complete. That occurred in the first quarter of this calendar year, when the initial sale of the Commerce Business Center was brought before the commission. The commission advisory meeting is being held tonight. The public hearing will be a formal part of the commission meeting on December 11th. And following that public hearing will be the commission action on the resolution for the surplus, as well as the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements amendment. Are there any questions or comments?
Any questions, Commissioner Downing,
None at this time, thanks.
Commissioner Aiel?
I don't think I have any questions either. It seems like you've met all the requirements to call it a surplus property, so.
That's correct.
I don't have any further questions, so thank you, Warren. Appreciate that. So
Excellent.
we'll look forward to hearing from you again at our next meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now move on to Panattoni New Market Industrial Campus lease, Warren Hendrickson.
Commissioner, would you like to entertain any public comment on the
Our
advisory?
public comment is at the end in this section, so thank you for clarifying.
Very good.
Point of information.
Yes, Commissioner Downing.
I'm sorry, I think I might have missed something. The second item under advisory calendar is Commerce Business Center Purchase and Sale Agreement. Are we going to talk about that?
Not yet, Commissioner. That's what's teed up right now.
Oh, because I heard Chair Harding say something about Panattoni.
I'm having a hard time today on the agenda, so my apologies.
Okay.
Second item.
Okay.
So apologies, Commissioner Downing.
Okay.
So Commerce Business Center CBC Purchase and Sale Agreement, Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yes, this topic is very closely related, and much of the information you will see duplicates what we just seen in the resolution. But this particular advisory item deals now specifically with the surplus property purchase and sale agreement for Commerce Business Center. It is an advisory only item. No action is requested this evening. It is subject to the resolution for the declaration of surplus property. This purchase and sale agreement cannot be executed without that resolution. By the same token, the resolution would serve no purpose without the execution of the purchase and sale agreement. The Port and 1892 Holdings LLC executed a letter of intent for the purchase and sale of Commerce Business Center on September 25th. At that time, purchase and sale agreement conditions were evaluated, and agreement on all conditions were reached by both parties on November 20th. This agreement going forward is contingent again upon the surplus property resolution. The location, 3 tax parcels, each with its own physical improvement, located in Lacey, Washington, north of I-5 at the intersection of Commerce Drive Northwest and Willamette Drive Northeast. Both northeast, sorry. Similar to the resolution advisory presentation, you saw the same requirements apply per the RCWs that are listed. Any property value greater than 10,000 requires disposal by commission resolution. The executive director certification to the Port Commission, public notice in the newspaper on 2 occasions, a public hearing, approval of the surplus property resolution by the commission, and then a second commission action on approval of the negotiated transfer. Again, the dates that were involved. The appraisal was completed on August 22nd. The agreed upon purchase and sale agreement by both parties on November 20th. Executive director certification took place on that same date. Newspaper public notice. The first one was published on November 22nd. The second one will be published on December 1st, meeting the 10-day requirement. The executive session was completed in the first quarter of this year. Commission advisory session is tonight. The public hearing, the commission action on the resolution, and the commission action on the purchase and sale agreement is all scheduled for December 11th. The terms of the purchase and sale agreement are as follows. The location of the tax parcels. These are the 3 individual tax parcels on Willamette Drive Northeast. The buyer is 1892 Holdings LLC. Their purchase price is $9.6 million. The valuation was done by appraisal. Payment date to the port will take place on closing. And additional conditions include a 70-day buyer due diligence period, port completion of the 2633 roof replacement, which is underway. And the agreement also calls for an as is, where is, and with all faults agreement by both parties. Any questions or comments before the purchase and sale agreement?
Questions, Commissioner Ryle?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, I guess. Have we done a return on investment analysis on this? Do we know if this is I understand we've owned this for about 7 years. I think it was purchased in 2016. I'd be interested to know if it met the port's expectations on return.
It did. The closing was in 2017. The appraised value of the property is at $9 million. The sale price is $9.6 million, and the port purchased it for $6.5 million. So in 6 years, approximately a 50% return.
Okay. So I know we've done we've done at least 1 roof replacement.
Two
roof replacements.
Yes, CBC 3. The third building was the largest of the group, was replaced last year, and this year we replaced the roof on building number 2.
And we've had some other maintenance costs over the years. I'm just curious if we've looked at all of those expenses that we've had over the year, and still we meet that expected return.
We have.
Yes. Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Downing?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Commissioner Ariel, for your question. Warren, I had the same question, which is what are the results of ownership? Now, Warren, you're not me, So therefore, you have not been subject to the many accusations and questions about this building ever since we purchased it. And so that's why, I'd really like to see a one-page summary. What did we buy it for? How much did we put it into year by year? What revenues did we achieve? And then, of course, the selling price. So that would go a long way towards, I can't remember if it's 1 million or 10 million, but, when we bought it, it was like some giant secret that, we bought these buildings and they needed a lot of repair work, and it was going to be $1 million a year for 10 years or something like that. So I'm sure that did not come to fruition. And so it'd just be great for you to present, perhaps at our next meeting, a little bit more financial summary of this building. And then people can turn to the port and say, well, I guess they got that one right. So that's one request they had. And the other question I had is, okay, so we take in 9.6 million, and that goes into, I think, the real estate reinvestment fund. But then the question is, are we paying off any bonds? When we bought this, I can't recall, I was in the seat 6 years ago, but I don't recall how we actually paid for this building. So do we have any bonds that we can pay off from the proceeds?
Warren, can I address that, please?
Please.
All right, so first of all, to your first point, Commissioner, this is Rudy. I just wanted, as a reminder, when we first came to the commission in executive session with this a number of months ago, we did create that summary and present it to the Port Commission. We can revisit that and make sure we bring that back to you and actually forward it to you before the next commission meeting, and then have it available for the next meeting as well. With regard to the bonds, yes, there is the bond that's associated with this purchase. Tad went over the bond profile in the last 3 of the budget meetings, and we can certainly review those. But at the end of the day, the net proceeds after the bond payment would then go into the real estate reinvestment fund, and then be subject to commission action on whatever those net proceeds are in the real estate reinvestment fund policy.
So Warren, it's reasonable that when you bring this for action at the next meeting, you'll be able to present the summary of the cost of maintenance and ownership, as well as the bond obligations.
That is correct. We can certainly do that. It will be Clarita that will make the presentation at the next meeting, but absolutely, we will have that all included.
Great. I think that does help communicate with the public the return on investment from the asset. And I also think that it helps us the future commission to consider bond debt versus conventional financing, especially when we're conducting business such as owning real estate rather than doing something for the public benefit. So at least asking the question as to whether bond debt makes sense or conventional financing makes sense. Based on the strengths and weaknesses of both. So,
sure.
And any additional questions for Warren?
None from me.
As usual, thank you, Warren, for those responses, and thank you, Rudy, as well.
Thank you very much. And now, Panattoni New Market Industrial Campus lease, Warren Hendrickson.
Thank you, Commissioners. Warren Hendrickson again. I would also, before going into this moment, I would like to mention that Clarita Maddox is available in the audience. Also attending tonight for this particular presentation from the Panattoni Development Corporation present in person is Brenda Fogg, and available online, I believe, is Lynn Syke, who are both representing Panattoni.
Could they just join us that way if there is?
They certainly can. Absolutely.
Available on the microphone. Do you have some chairs?
We'll bring the chair.
Chair right now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clarita. Welcome.
Warren,
Yes.
would you like them made a challenge to speak, or this one
If we have questions.
Sure, please, yes. And Len is available online? Oh, excellent. Well, good evening, Len. Great. Glad you could join us. Well, it's a pleasure to bring this item before you tonight, Commissioners. It is advisory only. There is no action required. One definition you will see throughout the presentation is NMIC for New Market Industrial Campus. This particular presentation deals with a Panattoni ground lease form amendment. It is an amendment of the ground lease form. It is not the execution of a ground lease tonight. Very, very important. The primary reason for bringing this issue before you tonight is to include in the ground lease form a provision that the Port and Panattoni have made with regard to a cost-sharing agreement of Center Street improvements. So I'll go into detail in those as we go forward. The picture on the left-hand side of the slide basically shows the general area of the New Market Industrial Campus west of the airport's runways. So substantial background and already several years of history between the Port and Panattoni. The ground lease option agreement was executed July 13th of 2020 for 199 acres within the New Market Industrial Campus. The standard lease form was approved by the commission on July 12th of 2021. It was called for the parties to agree to a standard lease form within the basic option agreement, and that was done in July of 2021. All but 29.27 acres of the 199 acres is subject to the Habitat Conservation Plan. Those 29.27 acres have been split out separately because there were no endangered species discovered or no species covered by the Endangered Species Act discovered on that particular parcel. And therefore, permitting is underway to develop what has become known as Lot 1. Construction is anticipated to begin in the spring of 2024. And the lease form amendment is now requested to demonstrate certainty to Panattoni's lenders in advance of construction that the Port has agreed to a measure of financial responsibility for Center Street improvements. Here is the overall location of New Market Industrial Campus, and the lot in particular is shown inside the yellow rectangle as a general area. The white border shows some of the development plans. The exact overlay of the yellow bordered box and the white are not exactly correct. The green bordered item is a phase 2 development, a little bit south of the yellow box or to the lower portion of the slide. But that gives you a general idea on what we're talking about. Pretty much the heart of New Market Industrial Campus, slightly to the west of Center Street and south of Tumwater Boulevard. The history of amendments and ratified documents before the commission is fairly extensive already at this point. Again, in July 2020, we executed the original lease option agreement. In October of that same year, Amendment 1 was approved by the commission. This included certain development agreement conditions that would be achieved as the process continued forward. In July 2021, Amendment 2 was approved. And this was not only the subdivision application in terms of the subdividing of the individual 199 acres into specific lots, 4 lots and a separate tract, but also an extension of the terms due to the delayed implementation of the Habitat Conservation Plan. At that same meeting in July of 2021, the original standard lease form was approved by this commission. In January 2022, Amendment 3 was approved. It extended the terms and provided expense reimbursement process and procedures. And again, the extension of terms was again due to delayed implementation of the Habitat Conservation Plan. In February 2022, the Port provided 2 phase approvals, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 specifically was the Port's approval of the subdivision of the 199 acres. This was within the executive director's authority to go ahead and approve based upon previous amendments, and ultimately created 4 lots and a separate tract within the 199 acres. The phase 2 approval was specifically for the development of what is now known as Lot 1 on Center Street. In March of this year, Amendment 4 was a further extension of the terms. And in case you're curious about what ultimately the series of extensions have resulted in, is currently the option lease agreement runs through August 31st of 2024. Based upon the Habitat Conservation Plan being completed by that date is certainly at risk of not being achieved. So likely there will be additional amendments that will come before the commission, or at least one, that will extend or perhaps consider a different way of addressing the completion of the Habitat Conservation Plan. The Lot 1 term sheet basically contemplates the entire 29.27 acres. It is a 55-year term with 2 10-year options, so a total of 75 years. It is at a rate of 48 cents per square foot. The total amount for that acreage would be $50,994.16 per month, plus leasehold excise tax. That's 12.8.4% above that dollar amount. And the rate is scheduled to adjust 10% every 5 years. Now, here is the backstory on the Center Street improvements and the requirement which ultimately led to the change in the lease form. There are several city permit stipulations as part of any development process. The city of Tumwater has evaluated the impact of Lot 1's development, its site plan use, the impact of increased vehicular traffic from the entire development. And as a result of the impact of that increased traffic, the city will require, as part of its permitting, as is typical for any kind of development, certain Center Street, which is a city-owned street, by the way, improvements as a condition for permit issuance. The road length to be improved is approximately 3,000 feet. It runs from Tumwater Boulevard to the southern terminus of Lot 1. Doesn't go all the way to 83rd, just to the southern border of the Lot 1 frontage on Center Street. Panattoni Lot 1 lease occupies approximately 576 feet of that Center Street frontage. So the end result is you have 3,000 feet of road improvement, where Panattoni's lot under this option only occupies 576 feet of that. The remainder is occupied by either current port tenants or is unleased port property for either future tenants, or in some portions, depending upon the parcel you look at, will be future Panattoni option property within the 199 acres, but outside these 29. Ultimately, then, the port and Panattoni sat down and completed a series of discussions, which ultimately resulted in the following bullet points associated with the cost sharing agreement. Panattoni will pay 100% of the full cost of the road improvements required by the city without port contribution. The entire 3,000 feet will be paid for by Panattoni upfront. All other Center Street parcels that front the Center Street improved area have been assigned a proportionate share of the total length of Center Street. The port will then in turn credit Panattoni its initial lease revenue against these proportionate shares. In other words, these other parcels are ultimately going to be responsible for future payback of the revenue for the Center Street improvements, but they are not currently leased. As a result, the port will then allow a credit against those parcels to Panattoni until the credit is fully amortized. And then when those other currently unleased parcels or part of the option parcels are eventually leased, there will be a latecomers agreement. And those tenants will at that time provide the revenue back to the port. So the port, essentially, it's a three-step process. Panattoni will upfront the costs. The port will then repay Panattoni as part of its improvements against a lease credit. And then thirdly, once we have new tenants on those other properties, then the port will again recoup that revenue. The impact of deferred Panattoni revenue will be approximately felt for 12 to 16 months, depending upon how quickly the other parcels get adopted, but that would be the worst case situation based upon the lease revenues expected from Lot 1. So the commission action that's before you, or will be before you on December 11th, will be the approval of the standard lease form amendment. The lease form amendment has been included in your packet. It includes all the details with regard to the cost sharing agreement and how that will be affected. This is not an approval of the actual lease of the parcel. That will take place in the first quarter or second quarter of 2024, depending upon final permitting arrangements between the city and Panattoni when we're ready to execute a ground lease. But a ground lease will be executed before construction begins. And that will be a separate issue that will come before the commission at that time. So tonight, we are only seeking to approve the lease form amendment. Not tonight. we're talking about that. The approval will come before you on the December 11th meeting. In case you have a question, why is a lease form coming before the commission? Normally it would not, but anticipating such a question, it was done in July of 2021. And it was brought before the commission. So to remain consistent with the intent of the past commission approvals, we will continue that process going forward. But normally a lease form itself is not something that would come before the commission, but we will continue that process through under this option lease of form agreement.
So normally it would be under the executive director's authority.
That's right, with Port Council approval. And the Port Council has reviewed each of these documents in turn as they've gone forward and been brought to you.
So the bringing this to the commission is for more public transparency and input.
It is, and also clearly identifies what the roles and responsibilities of each of the parties are. So with that, hand it over for any questions or comments, and I'll solicit, the expertise that's sitting beside me in the room.
Commissioner Downing, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thanks. Hi, Warren. Yeah, this issue's, close to my heart. I like the Panattoni Company. I've seen they've done good work throughout the Oregon and Washington, and they're being very patient with HCP. They're being very patient with how to develop, if they ever develop the 200 acres. But here's this 30-acre parcel that is more or less ready to go now. But I'm confused. I've been down there on a couple of field trips, and I look at that center street, and you say that it's 3,000 feet, and the port is going to act as the great equalizer by distributing the cost of the road improvement over several tenants. So my question to you first is, do we own the land on both sides of Center Street for this whole 3,000 feet? And so that therefore will they ultimately be port tenants that are asked to participate in covering this expense?
So with regard to that question, yes, the port does own 100% of the property on both sides of Center Street for the entire 3,000 feet. That portion that is on the west side of Center Street is under, the vast majority of it is under option to Panattoni. That portion of Center Street east of the center line of the road is on unleased port land. There is one parcel that is under option to Panattoni. There's also a combination of unleased parcels that are not subject to the option lease agreement. The most notable one would be the parcel that's dedicated to the Office of the Secretary of State Archives building. I will also say, just again, to be completely open about this, there are a few existing tenants that do lie along the Center Street improvement area. We have no capability within our existing lease to recover the cost of improvements to Center Street from those tenants. The lease did not envision that, and that provision isn't there. We will share that information with the tenants. They will ultimately accrue the benefits of conducting their business on an improved Center Street. But that revenue, which is a relatively small percentage of the total revenue of improvements or cost of the improvements, will not be returnable back to the port. That will be an infrastructure cost that the port will absorb in support of those tenants.
Historically, were those costs covered by the city for maintaining Center Street?
There was, let me address, maybe either Brenda or Len could speak to that a little bit more specifically with regard to, the city's permitting process.
Yeah, as part of the city's, this is Brenda Fudge with Panattoni, as part of the city's permitting process, they are the ones requiring the road improvement due to their lack of funding for road maintenance. So it's a code-based requirement that any development along Center Street is going to encounter. We just happen to be the first ones in. So we're learning and discovering how to address that with the city through the permitting process.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So Brenda, hi. So you're saying, well, let me just ask you if this statement is true. A number of people are using Center Street today with cars and trucks and a lot of big trucks and everything is copacetic. Nobody's being asked to spend a nickel, but here comes Panattoni, and Panattoni in effect goes over the limit. So they're 100% responsible for updating that road in the view of the city of Tumwater. Is that true?
Yes, any development that comes in the new market area will be triggered. We happen to be the first one. So it's not targeted to Panattoni, it's just we're the first developer in the neighborhood. So yes, the first new lot to be developed triggered it. The extra trips, new
Okay.
trips.
Oh, thank you. So my next question for Warren is, so for example, IWP is a pretty large operation. They seem to have a lot of trucks. I haven't watched if they go northbound or southbound, but I think they go northbound up to Tumwater Boulevard to be able to get on the freeway. So will they, at some point in the future, when their lease is redone, will they be part of that? What do you call it? The latecomers? Will they be part of that?
So the IWP parcel is south of Panattoni's Lot 1, and it lies along a portion of Center Street that will not be improved. It is south of the 3,000-foot length that will be improved as part of this process. So as a result, there is no improvement right now designated to the IWP frontage.
Well, I would push back on that by saying, yes, but they get to use the new road.
That is correct, and that is something that we will look at once the lease becomes renewable. But we would have to then engage in a new lease negotiation at that time, subject to completion of the existing options that the tenants may have.
But I think that's good clarification for the public that municipalities don't necessarily have the funds to repair and expand these roads. And so development is it since the Growth Management Act that development started paying for, I don't know how long ago, but development is paying to improve the roads that would otherwise go unimproved, to your point, Commissioner Downing.
I see. Okay.
So it's not the municipality, it's the development. Do you have other questions, Commissioner Downing?
Well, I have one more question that pops into my mind, and this is for Brenda. Brenda, is this something you feel good about this with your, I guess your conversations with Warren? Is this a good way to handle the situation given the circumstances?
Yeah, we were just trying to think of a situation that would work best for all parties. I think we see that it's a benefit for our project, but it's also a benefit for other tenants in the port. And hopefully everyone will benefit from it. And we also understand that, you know, the port doesn't always have funds readily available when these things pop up. So we want to do our best to work with the port to find something that meets everybody's needs. So.
Okay, great.
And I will, accent that too, because the partnership has been really very productive from that aspect. I applaud Panattoni for the work that they've done with the city. The initial price was going to be substantially higher than what was anticipated. So they've been very effective negotiators with meeting the city's requirements, but keeping the cost to an acceptable level for all parties. Future tenants will have the benefit. And ultimately, Panattoni is willing to shoulder the upfront cost without it affecting the port budget directly. And the only cost to the port is slightly deferred revenue, which will again be recovered at a fairly high percentage level down the road. So it's an excellent opportunity for Panattoni to move forward with the development and for the port to do so in a budget sensible way.
Commissioner Isle, do you have any questions or comments?
I have a question about the 30 acres and not being subject to the HCP. How did we determine that? Was there a survey done or?
There's a possibility of you do 2 surveys within the gopher season, 30 days apart minimum. And you basically look for any, vestiges of species that are covered by the Endangered Species Act. And those 2 inspections, 30 days apart, showed that there was no evidence. And so therefore, it was not subject to the Habitat Conservation Plan.
And I would like to add, it was all part of our permit application and SEPA application through the city of Tumwater. So it was all run concurrently through current. It is subject to the HCP. It's just, it was determined there were no gophers so that
there's no mitigation.
yeah. So it's not that it's excluded.
I
It's
got
just,
you.
yeah.
Okay. And so who signs off on that? Is that the city or is
The
that
city.
Fish and Wildlife?
The
No,
city.
City,
City.
okay. Then I was curious about the street improvements and how those are executed. Does Panattoni hire a contractor or is that the port or the city? How does that work?
That is correct. Once the city requirements are finalized, they will go to Panattoni as part of its permit acceptance. Then Panattoni will go out to bid, to go ahead to meet those city requirements. And that the port has already accepted whatever the city suggests is the requirements is what we've accepted as what will need to be done. Then based upon the bid, including reasonable design costs, which is subject to mutual joint agreement, then we can go forward with there from actually divvying up the total cost. Information in your package showed that right now the initial estimate is approximately $643,000. We do not anticipate those costs to be above $750,000.
Okay.
I would also add that we've created a separate plan set for just Center Street improvements. So we'll not be part of affiliated with the building permit. It will be a separate standalone plan set so that it's easy to measure where the costs are and there's no gray area on who's doing what part.
Okay, thank you. Don't let it.
Yeah, I'm obviously, I am a fan of activating our industrial land, and I think finding solutions so that we can move the project forward is exciting, especially when it's not putting the burden on the port. So appreciate you all being creative. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask if there was an updated timeline on the HCP, sir. No?
You didn't brief them on the off-limit questions?
There is not.
Okay, so just TBD.
To be there.
Okay.
Yes.
And also just appreciate the amount of time and resources that go into getting to this point in the project. I think that for the public's benefit, the amount of money that developers have to spend to try to do projects, they are already investing in our community regardless of what happens. So I appreciate that.
If I may, Clarita, anything to add? I want to take advantage of the
Yeah.
full team.
No, I think this has been a terrific way to partner with them. And actually, the city has been pretty cooperative, I believe, in helping this move along. And interesting enough to be able to reduce the price of the cost of that, or the standards and requirements that they had that's pretty significant.
Well, and I think that this is very much in line with Tumwater's comprehensive plan and also meeting their budget needs through tax revenue. Some of the testimony around funding of the schools and whatnot are significant. So as some of the council members I've spoken to, they're facing some tough budget decisions, and so actualizing their comprehensive plan will help them to meet the needs of the community.
And I think Mr. Syke is online too, if he has any additional comments he'd like to add.
Any additional comments?
No, I just, Joe, I think it was, one of the commissioners alluded to the costs that we have expended to date. I will tell you that it's about $1.2 million in the permit process. In addition to the road requirements that we were asked to do along Center Street, Brenda can share with you the detail of some mitigation fees for the interchange improvements at Tumwater Boulevard and I-5, which were also quite significant and are all attributed to this first phase for us. We think that, this is a good way, I think, to think of this program that we've been able to put together with Clarita and Warren, is it's essentially an interest-free loan. There's no interest being added to this. It's the total cost of the project and no added interest cost, which if someday the port in Panattoni disappears, had to improve that street, somehow they'd have to do bond financing or something that would have some additional cost to it. So that's all I'd add. We're excited to move forward. It's been a long haul. I reminisced a little bit that in July, it was 3 years since we started working on this project. It was no small task to go through countless studies on gophers to determine that we finally found an area that we could squeeze in a piece of property that was not impacted. So we're anxious to kick it off and are very hopeful that the habitat plan will get completed so that we can develop the balance of the 169 acres as well. Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Ayala knows all about long development with the project he's embarking on, so. Okay, anything additional? So we look forward to hearing from you at the next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very
you.
much.
You guys.
We will now move on to public comment on our advisory calendar. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to give public comment? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to give public comment? Okay, we are moving on to commissioner reports and discussions. Commissioner Downing,
No report. Thank you.
Commissioner Ayala.
I have no report this evening either.
My quote of the day is a Buddhist sentiment. There are 3 solutions to every problem. Accept it, change it, or leave it. If you can't accept it, change it. If you can't change it, leave it. Other business? No. Meeting announcements, executive director.
Well, I don't have a screen, so somebody else is gonna have to read the upcoming meetings.
I would be happy to. Do we have a slide? How am I, is it on here? Let's see. Got it? Okay, so November 27th, 5:30. Is that today?
Yes.
Commission meeting. No, that's okay. That's today. December 11th, we will be joined by our 2 new commissioners, and that is our first commission meeting, 5:30. I'm not sure where we'll be sitting yet, but and then January 8th, we will be joined by all 5 the new 2024 commission, and that commission meeting is at 5:30. There are no additional work sessions, and the calendar for next year will be presented to the new commission for approval. So beyond this, we'll see. Anything else, Executive Director?
No, no comments. Thank you.
Okay, well, I have to say, thanks, we moved along. So it is 6:42 and this meeting of the Port Commission is adjourned.
Great.
Good night. Good meeting, guys.
Yeah.